Hello everyone and welcome to this video overview for UnityCookie.com. My name is Patrick Woolens and in this video I want to show you some of the really cool new features that are shipping with the latest version of Unity, which is the new Unity 3.5. This version got released earlier this week, and if you just go to unity3d.com you immediately get the splash screen where you can either go to the download page and upgrade your software, or go to the What's New page and take a look at all of the release docs. So there's a lot of stuff to go over. Lots of really cool things have been added into this version. I'm not going to mention all of them. I'm only going to go over a couple of the big ones. So these are some of the main new features. Basically, we have a new particle system, which is completely curve and gradient driven. We have built-in pathfinding, which unfortunately is Unity Pro only, though I will also show this. We have new collision culling, which has been rewritten from the ground up. A new level of detail system. We have deployment to Google Chrome native client as well as the Flash player, though that one is still in beta. We have new lighting and HDR support. We have tons of stuff. Light probes I'm going to get into and show you a quick example of that. So I'm just going to go ahead and dive right into Unity here. First thing to notice is that in my view here, I just have an empty scene with only a camera. If I zoom in, the camera actually gets bigger, and here it fades away. So whereas in the old one, it was just always staying at the same size. So you may find this useful. If not, and you don't like change that much, like me, you can go to Gizmos and unselect 3D Gizmos. If you do like it, but you just don't like the scale, then you can use this slider and change it to whatever you like. So another thing you may notice here, that's new, is that in my gizmo, I now have, in between these arrows, I have these three squares, a blue, a red and a green one, each representing an axis. So if I were to click and drag on this red square here, then you may notice in the inspector on the right, on the transform, that I am now only moving this on the Y and Z axis. So I'm excluding the red one, the X axis. And this is really useful for instance, if this were a painting and I wanted to move it across the wall to try different positions, or if this was a tree and I wanted to move it over the floor a little bit, there's no more of that freehand moving and then having to reposition it in the correct axis, turn around, try different perspectives, etc. Though you can still use the freehand mode by pressing and holding down Shift, and now we get our familiar little box in the center back, which we can just click and drag and move it on all three axes perpendicular to your view angle. Alright, so let's just go on to I'm just going to go past a few of these really small things first. So we have a new preferences screen here, which now has these nice little tabs. Oh, actually, let me change my skin back here, so not as to alienate people who don't use the Pro version. We have our regular tabs, though it's just given a new sort of appearance here. External tools, colors, keys, the case server, which you can set up here. Okay, let's see what else is new. Oh, yes. Say that I have a couple of models in my scene, which is not very unreasonable to think of in a game engine. So I'm just going to drag in a couple of these. They're really big. I'm just going to drag them in front of you. So let's do something like this. And let's say that I had this, all of these high poly towers, whatever these may be, in my scene, and I wanted to replace them all with lower poly models because I am now building for the iPhone, for instance, or a lower end machine. And I feel like I've changed all of these, or replaced all of them, but I'm not sure, and I don't feel like going through the hierarchy. Well, what we can now do is we can find the prefab in our project folder, we can right click on it, and we can then say find references in scene. As you can see here in the search bar, it just fills in ref, then a colon and the name of the object that we want to find, and we can really easily pick out all of the high-res ones, which in this case is only one object. So this is something that we could have also done by simply typing in high-res in our search bar. So what's really cool about this is that if we were to have a material applied to this object, and on that material we would then have a texture, You could also right click on the texture here in the project folder, find the references, and then it would also select this object, because this reference or this object also a reference to a material, which holds a reference to a texture, which is the texture we're searching for. So a really cool and easy way to see if some of the textures you had lying around in that old folder you call backup with some kind of date, and see if that's still in use, or if by now you or someone of your team has replaced it completely, making for much better organization. So really love that one. Another cool one, and this is probably going to be the last small feature I'm going to show you, is if we go to Edit, Project Settings, and then Editor, we can now see we have an option for Asset Serialization. And we can set it to Mixed, which is the default, Force Binary, or, my personal favorite, Force Text. And what this does is, you can see I got a quick upgrade bar there, which is serializing all my assets. But here's the cool part. If I now go to, for instance, my scene object here, I select Reveal in Finder, or probably Show in Explorer for Windows users, I can open this up in any text editor. So I'm just going to use my built-in text edit here. And we get this really nice text makeup that's sort of similar to XML almost, except it doesn't use the inline tags, but a really cool way to get a good overview of your scene in text format. And you can make changes here and save that, though it's not always as obvious as what you're changing, but I could really see this being useful for when two people in your team accidentally worked on the same scene and neither of you wants to do the changes. You can just merge the two files together using any kind of diff program, or maybe even do it manually. But either way, this is a really cool way to get a nice and easy insight into how your scene looks and perform manipulations on it without even having to boot in Unity, really. I mean, I could go and find something here. You know, I know that this animation is wrong, and oh darn it, I just closed down Unity, don't want to boot it up again. Well, I can just change that here, make the changes, save them, and that's that. Alright, so that pretty much covers it, I think, for the smaller features that I wanted to show you. Oh, one thing, if we go to Component, this screen has had a bit of a makeover as well, though not really big. We now have an Effects tab, which now says Particle System. And you may remember that this used to be in Game Object, Create, Other, and it still is. And actually we're going to play with that in just a second here. Oh, there it is, right at the top. But we also still have the old particles, which you can find under Legacy Particles. And I still find these particles useful for some things. I'm definitely loving the new one as well, because it makes things really easy, which you're going to see in about a minute. But the old particles do definitely still have a use in Unity, I feel. Other than that, we now have a navigation tab, which is for the built-in nav mesh features and pathfinding. That, again, unfortunately, is only for Unity Pro. I think we may have a couple of new audio things, though I'm not entirely sure on that. Here we have our Light Pro groups, our new occlusion areas and portals, and our level of detail groups. And I think that's pretty much it for the new stuff in here. So I'm just going to go ahead and go to Game Objects, Create Other, Particle System. And you can see that immediately it starts spawning particles. And we have this new little box here, which has a playback speed, playback time, and we can pause, stop, or simulate. And what this does is we can, in real time, scrub through the timeline to see how our particles will behave over time. So this will give you a really good insight in how it goes and make it able for you to better predict how they will react in certain circumstances. So no more changing a value, playing the game, waiting for it. It started, seeing if it works. Nope, stop it, changing a value again, going back and doing that all over again. So really easy way to see that. If we take a look at our inspector here, let me just close down my transform. This is the particle system component. So we can collapse that, and it's only one component. But inside this component, we have several different modules. So I can collapse the particle system, which is for the default settings. We have our emission, which we can change here. We have shape, velocity over lifetime, linear or limit velocity, force, color, etc. So I just want to show you a couple of things with this real quick. First, in our particle system, we have things that we've always had, such as duration. A new one is looping. If we disable this, and let's change the duration a bit. This will go once for and emit for 2.8 seconds, and that's that. And if we turn looping on, then, oh, actually, let's simulate that. If we leave looping on, then 2.8 seconds will be the complete time for one cycle to finish. And if we turn it off, it will start emitting, and then it will stop after 2.8 seconds. So really cool to create bursts or something like that. You also have pre-warm, which makes sure that the particles don't have to boot up, basically making sure that one of these cycles has already passed, so it doesn't start with building up force and stuff like that. And a bunch of other cool features here. We have start color, gravity modifier, which is pretty neat. If we change that, you can see that they now get affected by the gravity. So let's also give it a bit more speed. Where is it? Start speed. If we do something like that, you can see we're sort of getting almost a fountain-like effect. So let's set the lifetime a bit higher. Maybe spawn a couple more particles. Alright, well, you get the idea. You can see they're getting spawned up, and then the gravity is affecting them, essentially pulling them back down. So, again, really cool stuff. I feel like I'm being a bit repetitive, sorry about that, but it's definitely true. So I'm going to go over and take a look at something like color over lifetime. Let's enable it first. You can see that now color is no longer unchecked. And you can see we have this little drop-down menu here. We can choose between gradient and random between two gradients. And what this means is, if we click on this box here, we now get a new panel called Gradient Editor. And in this Gradient Editor, we can select colors. So let's make this go blue. Now it starts off as blue particles, and over the course of their lifetime, which is at the end, this is where the particles die, they will be completely white. Now we can also play with these top ones here, where we can set the alpha values. So I can set this to 0, so you can see they will fade to white as well as fade to 0 alpha. And of course we can click here and add more of these color swatches. So let's make this a nice red. This is going to look really awful. But still a really easy and powerful way of controlling the color of your particles. So I'm going to leave that on, even though it's not the best or most aesthetically pleasing particle effect. I want to find one with the, let's take a look at rotation, but nope. Size by speed. Alright, let's enable this one. And what this does is, if we take a look at the drop-down menu, we can choose between curve, random between two constants, and random between two curves. And these curves are, again, sorry for my lack of vocabulary here, but really cool feature. If we click on this box here, then we get this curve editor at the bottom, where I can take any of these points, drag them, and immediately you can see that I get this really nice Bezier curve there. I can also grab one of the handles and pull on that, make it different. And we can also change the interpolation using one of these buttons, or set some defaults. Actually, I think this doesn't change the interpolation, these are just some default curves, sorry. But you can, for instance, I could take this one here and let's move that one up, move the entire point down. There we should see something with the size. I think the color over lifetime is sort of negating the effect. Let's click it off. Oh, I thought we just couldn't see it because of the alpha, but oh, there we go. Either way, the particles, you can't see that well. Oh well. The idea is that the particles over the lifetime, again, start as when they are born, here's where they die. The particles slowly grow, and then at about 70% of their lifetime, they're going to decline again. They're going to shrink back. Let me just quickly see if this would make it more. Oh, I just flatlined it. Oh well. Alright, there we go. So what this does is it slowly makes them grow. If we then move this one back down, the handle up. Alright, not the most clear example. I'm going to stop here before you get too bored. Sorry. I think that's pretty much it for this new particle system as far as basic overview goes. It's definitely really powerful, and I'm sure there's a lot more stuff we can do with it that I haven't touched yet, but definitely worth playing with and looking into. So I'm just going to go ahead and delete that one. The next thing I want to show you is, let me just take a quick peek of my list here. Light probes, yes. Alright, so if you don't know what this is, I'm just going to set up here a quick scene. Let's take a plane. There you are. And let's recollapse my transform. And let's scale this up a bit. So let's say 20 by 20. Oh, this can be 1. Traditional light baking. Make sure that if I can talk and do things at the same time, I still can do that. Point light. Move this up a bit. Take a look. Oops. Increase the range a bit. So what's the intensity? We need more range. There we go. And I'm going to create 3 simple lights here. One for red, blue, and green. Alright. So the idea of light mapping is that you are taking all of the dynamic lights, which is what point lights and such are, and you are baking their influence onto the surface into a texture. And the idea is that you can then remove the light and still make it seem like the surface is being affected by the light. And while this is a really great way of making sure that creating some performance gains, this doesn't work on dynamic objects or characters, making them always feel a bit out of place almost. And the sole fix for that is light probes, which basically make a snapshot of the surrounding environment and then store that into sort of an HDR probe that then gets projected back onto dynamic objects, if you so wish. Let's make this sort of this lime greenish, right? And let me just real quick here show you what I mean with that. Let's also create our player, which is going to be a cube. And he seems really tiny, so let's make him, no, more, 10, 10, 10. Alright. So the idea here is that if you go to Window and then Light Mapping, and this is already stuff that was in the old version of Unity as well. I want to move this next to that. I can enable it as Light Map Static. And I can go to Bake, and I'm going to say Single Light Maps for this tutorial. I'm going to go to Maps, and I am going to say Bake Scene. I need to save this scene. That's exactly what I'm going to do. Seeing that Unity already exists, sure, I'll replace it. Right. And you can see it being baked here. And I'm just going to wait for this to finish real quick. And what should happen is if I then remove these lights, then we should still have these red, blue, green dots on the floor. Because it stored that into a texture and applied that texture as a light map UV onto this surface. So it's still baking. Maybe I should have turned the resolution down a bit, but we're almost there. Alright, and we're done. So what I can now do is select this light, and select the green light, and I can just delete them. Oh, apparently it only took one. And you can see that indeed the blobs are still on the floor. But here's the tricky part. If I now move the character into the blob, oh no, he doesn't turn red. He's really sticking out. You can see that there's not actually a light there. This makes it very obvious that this here is faked. So as I said, we now have light probes to sort of counteract that. And the way to set that up is by creating a new game object, which I'm just going to make it empty. And I'm going to go to Components, and then, what was it? Rendering, Light Probe Group. And I go to the inspector here. You can see that I have this new panel where I can add a probe, select all, delete the selected, or duplicate selected. These are not actual objects you place, these are basically instances that are under the hood parented to this game object. So if I add this, I can still treat it as one. I can move it around, I can press Command D to duplicate it, I can delete it with my normal hotkeys, etc. So let me move this over. Actually, I can't see the dot, so let's turn back on 3D gizmos and maybe make them a bit bigger. Alright, I hope you can see them now. There we go. So I'm going to move this. Basically, I want to place one light probe where there's a big change in light intensity. Now, to really sort of demonstrate that, this is one of the worst examples that I could probably make. But you can find a really good example of that in the new Unity docs that you get with the latest download. So I'm just pressing Command D, moving a probe over here, placing one in every center of the light blobs, as well as one in between each of them, one in the center. Then a final one that I'm going to place strategically. So one here, one in the center. Now, the one rule to this, for this to work properly, is that they need to be able to form a volume. And you can't form a volume if you're flat on the ground. So to get around that, I'm going to duplicate this last light probe. I'm going to grab it on the y-axis and move it up. As you can see, this sort of cone or pyramid shape being formed. And this is really the inside volume that it needs to interpolate between those lights. So I'm going to leave that as is. Next up, I'm going to select my cube object here. And under the mesh renderer, I want to enable use light probes. And I don't want to use an anchor override for this. But that seems good. I do think that I need to re-bake this. So let me quickly, I'm probably going to pause my recording and be back as soon as it's done baking. Alright, so it just finished baking this. So let's try deleting these point lights again. Alright, perfect. And you can see that my cube is now still red. So I move him there, he gets redder. If I move him here, he goes sort of from here to go more to the blue and into the green. Or I can just grab him on the green square here. I can move him across the floor. Here he's sort of in the center point. You can see him sort of getting that dark purple. It's not really working properly here, or as properly as it probably should, because it's not inside the volume. But overall, this is a really cool way of faking lights, and a really cheap one, because this entire scene now looks really well lit. Well lit for the demo example anyways. But we have 0 dynamic lights in our scene, which is a real relief and a major performance gain. So you should definitely consider this if you're developing, again, for low-end devices like maybe iPhones or Androids or stuff like that, or web players, but even in bigger games where you have big levels with lots of dynamic lights. So I'm going to leave this for what it is now and just create a new scene here. Why not? Let's save it. Right, so right now what I want to show you is the last two things, and those are the Pro-only features. One for the level of detail system and one for the navigation mesh. So let me go ahead by starting with the LOD system, and I'm going to create an empty object here that I'm going to call Fantasy Tower. And you may have noticed that I have this high-res and low-res version. So I'm going to drag in both of them into my scene. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to separate out the mesh of these. So that's looking at the inspector. I can close the light mapping panel now. I'm going to look for the object that has the mesh filter attached. So this one is the wrapper object, so to speak. This is the raw OBJ with the animation component as well. And this is the mesh, and this is the one I want. So I want to copy this name of high-res and rename the mesh as such. Do the same for the low-res. And then I want to parent the mesh object instead of to the current one to the Fantasy Tower object I just created. Yes, I want to lose its prefab. I'm going to do the same for the high-res version. Okay. I'm going to delete these two import objects because they're now empty shells basically. And with my Fantasy Tower, I just want to make sure that I've parented the shells correctly or placed them correctly. So I want to zero out their locations, 0, 0, 0, and same for the low res. And I know that I made an error in exporting this correctly, so I'm going to need to do a quick manual fix. So that's where the center is. For now, I'm just going to assume one of these two is correct. I'm just going to move this over a bit. So something like that seems close enough for what we want. Then on this fantasy tower object, which is the parent of them all, I'm going to go to Component, Rendering, LOD Group. And if you don't know, LOD stands for Level of Detail. And the idea behind this is that when the object is too far away, the object gets cold, it doesn't get drawn at all. As you get closer, it pops in a low res model, then a higher res, and even higher, or the highest. So LOD 0 is your complete high poly model, and then you can set in different levels of gradation in between. Now currently, I've only prepared a high and low poly model, so I'm going to right click on LOD 2 and I'm going to delete it. And so I'm going to leave the culling percentage here, which usually would be a lot less. But for this, I'm going to leave it here so we can easily sort of see the changes that we make. And then if we go to LOD 0, again, let's uncollapse this. And I want to select my high-res mesh and drag it in here. And then for LOD 1, I want to go ahead and drop in the low-res. So now I can grab this camera here and I can move around. And you can see the red square there being symbolic for the camera view, or the view that you would see in-game. So if I'm this close, it gets cold. You get closer, you can see the low-res model, and then when you get really close, it gets swapped out for the high-resolution one. So really easy to set up, and again, this is very useful for big environments like cities or forests, or really just the bigger levels, the sort of free roam things. And using this combined with occlusion culling and maybe even the light probes and light mapping, that's going to be a major performance boost. So that's it for this one. And the last thing that I promised to show you was the new NavMesh feature, which a NavMesh is basically a simplified version of your level where AI characters can walk over using pathfinding algorithms. So the way to set this up is I've prepared a maze object here. Let me just drag that in. And let's zero that out as well for consistency's sake. And we get it nice on the camera here. Let's go to F, or to focus in on it. And so you can see that I have this really basic sort of 8-track with some ramps going up there. And I then want to, not on the maze itself, but on the mesh of it, I want to go to Window, and then Navigation. And then I can check this for being navigation static, which means that it's not going to change, and so that this is going to be a static path that the agents can walk on, even though you can still have dynamic elements, such as boxes falling into the way or trees falling over, that will actually block the path. And the off-mesh link generator is used for connecting meshes that aren't connected, though I'm not going to get into that for now. We can set different navigation layers. We have default, not walkable, which would be for obstacles, and we have jump, which is a weighted layer, sort of to show what this can do. And you can make your own layers and weight them. And by weight, what that means is, well, in a nutshell, if you're familiar with pathfinding algorithms like the A*, you could see this as the heuristic value. To get a little bit deeper in that, but not too deep, say I have an agent here, a character with some AI, and I want to get him on here. Now the shortest path would maybe to go here, up the ramp, and then onto there. But what if this ramp here wasn't made of normal soil like the rest of the level, but of slippery ice? Then you could say that the ice layer would cost a lot more to traverse because it would take more energy for the character to get on there. So if the ice would take 10 times as much energy to walk than normal soil path, which might be this direction, then the character would still follow this path. So instead of just finding the shortest path, it would find the path of the least resistance. And that's what you can use these layers for, and I haven't played with it yet. I'm currently using another pathfinding system for the current game we're working on here, CG Cookie. But I am definitely looking forward to also trying this one out, seeing how it compares, and really just toying with it, see if I can break it, do all kinds of cool stuff with it. Okay, but anyway, I'm getting sidetracked. I'm going to go to the bake settings here, and what I want to change are a couple of things. First, if I go to a nice side view, and let's also disable that because that camera is getting really big. This angle, I'm not sure how much it is, but I am guessing it's more than 45 degrees from the ground up. So this angle here. I'm guessing it's going to be slightly more, but just to be on the safe side, since I have no other weird or unexpected edges, I'm going to crank this up to 60 degrees. Then for the height, I'm also going to have to reduce that a bit, because in this overpass, there's only very little room between this height and there. So I'm going to have to make that a bit less, and I'm guessing that around 1 will be enough. Well, actually, let me show you first what happens when I have it at 2, because baking this is actually pretty fast. I'm going to set the minimum region area to 0, and this is basically the edge margin, is what you could see it as. Okay, let's try it again, 0. And we can use a height mesh, which is more accurate but also slower. But this one is pretty cool, the drop height, which means that if I have an agent standing here on the top floor and his target is there, if the drop height is high enough, and so you could say that that's the height at which he could survive a fall, then he could jump down like this, take a shortcut. Otherwise, he'd have to walk all the way around. And the jump distance is for jumping from one mesh to another if they're not connected. So if I were to have another maze, and select that, move that over. So basically, he may be able to still make this jump, but not this jump. Alright, but going back to this one, selecting the mesh I want to bake from, I'm going to go here, and for the width and accuracy percentage, let's just change these to their minimum values as well, and hit bake. You need to save the scene. Alright, let's call it nav, and it's exporting task, boom, and it's done. So you can see this really cool blue grid here, which is the area that the agents can walk on. But as you can see, it's missed a little bit of spot here. And that's because my height was still set to 2, which is too high. This is the minimum height needed between levels for it to make it walkable. So I'm just going to move that, crank that down to, well, let's make it 1. And hit bake again. You can see this being filled in. This was changed a little bit, and that's it. We now have a nav mesh. It's only done this on the top, which is what we want. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go to Game Object, create Other, and I want to create a capsule. And I'm going to have to shrink this one down a bit, because he won't fit under the underpass either. So let's place him there. Probably move him up a bit. Let's go to the inspector. Let's scale him to about 30% of his original size. Maybe a bit small, so I'm going to zoom in a bit. You know what? 0.5, 0.5, 0.5. Alright, that'll do fine. Now the only thing I need to do here is go to Component, Navigation, Nav Mesh Agent, and we get all of these settings. So we can set a radius, speed, acceleration, angular speed, stopping distance, all of these values. Height, I'm going to change that one as well, because he still needs to fit under there. So we're going to give him a height of 1, or I guess technically it should be 0.5 here. Base offset, obstacle avoidance type, nav mesh walkable, so you can say which layers this player can walk on, or this character. So you may have different monsters, some of which could maybe swim across a pond, while others can't. So the only thing that you can do from this component that's needed, that I'm actually a bit disappointed by, is that you can't set the target. Because for this pathfinding to work, the agent, which is this character, needs to have a target to walk towards. And the only way to set that is through script. So I've prepared this simple script here, which, quick overview, var destination transform, so we can have a slot to fill in any kind of object where it needs to chase. I am storing private var NMA as a navmesh agent. In the start, I'm getting that component, and then in the update, I'm constantly setting its destination to the destination's position that we entered here. So why am I doing this in the update? Because that way, every frame he chases the object. If I were to do this in the start, he would set that point, but if I then move the object, it wouldn't do anything. Right now, it's constantly fetching the object to chase new position and setting the destination accordingly. So I'm going to drag that onto my capsule here. And all we need now is a game object to chase. So let's create, you know what, I'm just going to create another cylinder here. And this cylinder is scared of him, so he went to the top of the bridge. And he's laughing at the navigation agent because he can't reach him, or so he thinks. Let me remove this component. Let me remove this component. And now on the AI character, I'm going to give up the other capsule as its target. There. And now, fingers crossed this works as I hope it does. Let's play the game. And, oh, let's not maximize it. Let's go here. Oh, he goes there. Across the border. Oh, and got him. And so now if I, like I just said, if I now move around this character, I'm just going to freehand this. He starts following him automatically. Nope, I'm here. Going back. Going here. You can see that because I didn't set up a drop distance, the character didn't jump towards him. So that might be fun to try. I haven't actually done this yet, so I'm hoping it works as I told you it does, and that it works as I expect it to. Go to the bake. Let's say that the drop height is, well, let's just set it to 2 to make absolutely sure that it's possible. Real quick here, rebake this. And again, I'm very curious to see if this works. Let's not maximize this on play. Play the game, and there he goes. He starts chasing him. Is this close? Oh no! And then there we go. No, he doesn't do that. Alright, well, like I just said, I haven't played with that yet either. I'm sure I'm missing something. But anyway, that's pretty much it for the basics, and also the end of this overview video. Like I said at the beginning, there's tons of new features, so it's definitely worth reading through this and finding out what kind of stuff is new. We have multi-threaded rendering, we have, well, what is there? Oh, right, sorry, the Google Native Client and Flash export. If you go to File and Build Settings, you can see that we now have this Flash Player preview here, which, like I just already said, it's still in beta, and it's a pre-release version. And it also says here that it will ship in a later version of Unity as an add-on license. So it's going to be similar to the Android or iOS licenses or any of the big consoles, where you can buy an extension to Unity and plug that in and get that functionality. Though I think it may still definitely be worth getting that feature if your games are suited. Being able to port your game to Flash and have it on sites like some of the major Flash portals, that could really be a cool way of getting more revenue for your game, as well as more attention. Another thing to get on the web is using the web player, which now also features a new checkbox, which is the Enable NACL support, which stands for the Native Chrome client. Native client, that's it. And what this does is, on Google Chrome, it no longer needs the Unity web player for the game to play. It's all going to be native and very close to native speed. At least that's what they promised, and I'm taking their word for it. So what that means is that from your browser you can immediately play this without having to install any plugins, worry about updates. All of that is done under the hood, and nor you nor the user has to worry about that, which is, again, really amazing, and I could definitely see this working and creating some really cool ways of sharing your games and getting them out there. And yeah, I think that's really it then. Let's see, new occlusion, culling, text-based scenes, GPU profiler. there's just so much stuff. I'm not even going to bother reading through it again. Thank you all very much for watching. I hope this was useful. I definitely recommend getting the latest version and playing around with it a bit. Maybe start a new project first. Don't upgrade your project right from the get-go. If you do want to do that, then of course be free to, but I would advise to at least make a copy first or a backup. Maybe some of your teammates still have an older version, or you decide you want to go back. But the upgrade process of your projects is a one-way road. So you can upgrade them, but not downgrade them. And yeah, I'm starting to sort of get sidetracked again and ramble on. So I'm going to stop right here. And thank you all very much for watching, and catch you some other time.